ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नामश्रेष्ठं मनुमापि सच्चिपुत्रम् अत्र स्वरूपं रूपं तस्य ग्रजमरूपुरीं मातरिं कष्टावतीं राधाकुण्डं गिरिवरं महो राधिकमधावशं प्राप्तो यस्य पतितकृपाया श्रीगुरुं तं नतोऽस्मि। वञ्चाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। निखिलाश्रितमौले रत्नमालयति निराजितपदपङ्कजन्त आजीमुक्तकुलैरुपश्यामनं परितष्टुं हरिनां संश्रयामि। अनार्पितचरीं चिरात् करुणयावतीर्णा खलु क्षमार्पयितुमुन्नतोज्ज्वलराशं स्वभक्तिश्रियम् हरिपुरता सुन्दरद्युतिकदम्बसन्दीपितः सदा हृदये कन्दरे स्फुरतो वासचिनन्दना। अजानुलम्बिता भुजो कनकावततो संकीर्तनायकपितरो कमलायताक्षो विश्वम्भरो द्विजावरो जुगधर्मपालो वन्दे जगत्प्रियकरो करुणावतारो। लादिनी शक्तिस्वरूपाय गौराङ्गसुहृदाय च भक्तशक्तिप्रदनाय गदाधर नमस्ते। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कान्त राधा कान्त नमस्तुते। राधे वृन्दावनाचे कमृतवाहिनी कृपया निजपादब्जा दर्शनमयं प्रदीपम्। भक्त्या विहीनाय अपराधाय क्षिप्ताश्चाकमादितरङ्गमादिः कृपाय त्वां शरणं प्रपन्नं वन्दे नमस्ते चरणारविन्दं वन्दे नमस्ते चरणारविन्दम्। श्रील भक्तिवेदांत नारायण गोस्वामी महाराज की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। श्री श्री गौर नित्यानंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा गोविंद जी की जय। सच्चिदानंद गौर हरि की जय। श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जय। गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। गौर हरि हरि बोल। So all of you, welcome and thanks so much for welcoming me and inviting me today again at the feet of Sri Sri Radha Govindaji, Mahaprabhu, Srila Narayan Maharaj, all the Vaishnavas assembled. Thank you, Tamal Prabhu, for the generous introduction. Hopefully to be able to honor those words in one way or another. So, as he mentioned, as you may know, a few days ago I've started a tour that will last for a few months. I have started here in Alacha, and in that context I'm extending some thoughts on a book recently published called Radical Personalism, which basically for me is another way of speaking about Gaudiya Vaishnavism, since we are personalists, and not only personalists, but radically personalists. So radical means to the very root. We worship the supreme personality of Godhead, not only Godhead, but not only the personality of Godhead, but the supreme personality of Godhead, the supreme personality of Krishna, as I like to refer to Sriman Mahaprabhu. When Krishna wishes to explore the depths of his own heart, the depths of Radha's heart, he manifests as Satchidananda Gaur Hari. So ours is an ultra-personalized tradition. So in that sense, I felt inspired to refer to Gaudiya Vaishnavism as radical personalism. And of course, as members of that tradition, we are expected to represent it in that same way. We are expected to be radically personal. Radical means something to the very root, to its very core. And today, in that connection, I want to share a few words that come in chapter 10 of my book, where I'm talking about non-dual thinking and how, in order to be personalist, we need to have a non-dual foundation, and the role and the complementarity between non-duality and personality. The two of them are necessary in the equation, so to say. On one side of the equation, we have personalism. On another side of the equation, you might have heard about impersonalism. Sometimes impersonalism is called radical non-dualism, which ultimately portrays there's only Brahman, nothing else. Radical non-dualism. And we have radical personalism, but our radical personalism is also non-dual in its own way. But it's not radical non-dualism, it's not impersonalism. Sorry to torture you with so many different words. Do you follow my point? So our tradition is called Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Gaudiya Vedanta. We have our own approach to Vedanta. Impersonalism is Advaita Vedanta. Ours is Gaudiya Vedanta. And Gaudiya Vedanta is non-dual also. Our tradition is non-dual, but in its own way. If we lose sight of the non-duality of Gaudiya Sampradaya, there may be a problem, as we will try to describe today. So, of course, most of us sometimes may be accustomed to thinking of non-dualism or non-duality just in relation to impersonalism. So non-duality is Mayavad. But it's important to bear in mind that Gaudiya Vaishnavism is also a non-dual tradition. So, just to go to a very immediate reference in that connection, we can go to basically one of the most important verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, on top of which Srila Jiva Goswami unfolds his whole Sandarbhas, basically. Vedanta tat tattva vidas tattvam tit jnanam advayam Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Shabdyate. So this is a very famous verse of the Bhagavatam, probably in the top 5 shloka, so to say. Sri Jiva Goswami unfolds his whole presentation of Gaudiya Siddhanta, his Satsandarbha, on the basis of this verse, showing us how much is in one single shloka, how much the Bhagavatam has potential to give us. So basically, this verse is defining reality. The word tattvam in this verse refers to reality. Tattva is a word for reality. As advai gyan. So advai means non-dual, and gyan means consciousness. In this case, gyan can mean also knowledge and other things. But in this particular verse, the Bhagavatam is describing reality is non-dual consciousness, which of course expresses itself in the form of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So at the end, we have the diversity, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. That to begin with is Advai Gyan. Reality is non-dual in its foundation. So the ultimate reality, according to these verses, means the ultimate reality is conscious, Gyan, and non-dual, Advai. And interestingly, the word Advai includes Dvai, includes duality. Like implying there is duality, but duality doesn't have a separate existence in it by itself, basically. Self-existent reality is one, not two. And that's why we say non-dual. Sometimes our acharyas will say the one without the second. You may have heard that expression sometimes. No? The absolute is one without the second. So it's the one. There's not a second absolute reality. They're not two separate absolute realities. Of course, when we say that the absolute reality is non-dual, we are not, again, proposing Mayavad, impersonalism, Advaita Vedanta. We are not saying that there's nothing existing individually apart from non-dual reality. But basically, the word non-dual in the Bhagavatam, as we find in this particular verse, refers to the absolute is, as Srila Maharaj will quote Hegel, for himself and by himself. So absolute reality is self-existent, is self-contained, so to say. It is grounded in itself, basically. It it doesn't depend on any other external support. That means reality is non-dual. And also reality non-dual means nothing else can exist independent of that absolute reality. That reality exists independent of everything, and nothing exists independent of that absolute reality. And that's why sometimes again we say the one without the second. So Krishna, Bhagavan, is that absolute reality for us, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, ultimately. But according to the Bhagavatam, again, reality expresses itself in very degrees of experience, so to say, called Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. But the point is that Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are not three different entities. Again, reality, the absolute is non-dual. So that's a simple, common sense, but it's necessary to repeat. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are not three different people, three isolated realities. It's the same non-dual substance being perceived differently according to how we approach that non-dual absolute. That's what Jiva Goswami makes, the point he makes in the Bhagavad Sandarbha. Basically says absolute reality is one, but it will be perceived differently according to our approach. It's like if you don't have a subway here in Alacha, right? It's too much, but I'm sure all of you know what the subway is. So I can have it in my hand. I think that's. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there won't be more chance for. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. If you're in a subway in the tunnel, you look upon a tunnel, and if the subway is coming, but it's not right in front of you, what you will see is what?
The shadow.
Some light from the subway coming, but you just see the light. You don't see the wagon, the train, and all the details of the subway. You just see the light. Then when the wagon, the subway, becomes closer, you start to see the train. But still you don't see what's going on inside the train, the people and all the interactions that are happening there. That will be akin to Paramatma, so to say, in between. And then when the train stops in front of you, opens the door, you can enter. You can meet Jai Jagannath inside the train and just start to chat with him. But none of those things were available when you saw the light on the tunnel, but that was there. But just you were seeing that from a distance. You follow? I mean, the subway is always the same, but you are located closer in certain proximity or not. So the point is, absolute reality is the same. Subway is non-dual, so to say. the absolute reality is one, but it will be perceived in three different ways according to our approaches: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And of course, each one of them will have its own unique experience. When we say Bhagavan, I mean, there are so many experiences that different devotees will have of Bhagavan. Bhagavan Narayan, Bhagavan Ram, Bhagavan Krishna. How many Bhagavan Krishnas are there? Braja Krishna, Mathuresh Krishna, Dwarkesh Krishna, Bhagavan Gaur Hari, and so on and so forth. But the foundation is non-dual. Again, the foundation is the same. Sometimes the example of the absolute given is the jewel. You have a jewel and you will be able to perceive different rays and different colors emanating from the jewel according to how you approach it. Again, Krishna says in the Gita, Yayatmam prapadantitam stataiva bhajamyaham. According to how you approach this jewel-like absolute, you will be able to perceive one phase or another. Bhagavan is the qualified expression of the absolute. Brahman is the unqualified expression of the same absolute, same non-dual substance. So the Bhagavatam almost starts by describing that. This is one of the very first sections of the Bhagavatam, Advai Gyan Tattva. That's what the Bhagavatam says. And interestingly, not only this is the only verse in the Bhagavatam where reality is described as non-dual, but at the very end of the Bhagavatam, if you go to last chapter of the last canto and almost the last verse, not the last, almost verse number 12 from chapter 13 from canto 12, again, reality is described as Advitiyam Vastu, as non-dual substance. And interestingly, the Bhagavatam then says Tan Nishtam. Tan Nishtam in this context means the whole subject matter, because it's one of the last verses. So the Bhagavatam is kind of, how to say, wrapping up. No? So reflecting upon what was shared throughout the treatise. So it says the whole subject matter of this Bhagavat is Advitiyam Vastu, is non-dual reality. Which again, I'm not saying here the Bhagavatam is promoting Advaita Vedanta. I'm just making the point. The Bhagavatam is talking about non-dual reality.
I'm not sure I fully understand exactly where you're trying to go here.
Give me a few minutes and
The point?
I'm going. Patience is the mother of all virtues. So you can do it. You can do it. We like circles. Rasa dance is circular dance. No problem with circles. So my point is that the Bhagavatam is saying its main subject matter is non-dual reality. Just so we get a taste for the idea of non-duality, and we are careful not to feel just repelled by that. Because sometimes we may have developed some scars about the word non-dual counts, and it's like, no, that's impersonal. We are not non-dual. Yeah, we are non-dual, but in our own way. So if the Bhagavatam's main topic revolves around non-dual reality, and if the Gaudiya Sampradaya revolves around the Bhagavat, as it does, our whole Gaudiya Vaishnavism revolves around the Srimad Bhagavatam, and if the Bhagavatam revolves around non-dual reality, then Gaudiya Vaishnavism revolves around non-dual reality as well. So our goal is non-dual reality, but in a very particular way. We call it Achintya Bheda Ved Tattva. So there I'm getting to the point, hopefully. Achintya Bheda Veda Tattva is our official Vedanta, so to say, our official system of philosophy. Srila Jiva Goswami gives the name, basically coins the term Achintya Veda Veda Tattva, which means reality is non-dual, but there is at the same time, on the basis of that non-dualism, on the basis of that unity, there is diversity. There is diversity, but the diversity is coming on the foundation of non-duality. So that allows for the expression of Leela, for example. Leela with Bhagavan is, Leela technically speaking is non-dual play. It's not just play, anyone can play in a dualistic way, but non-dual play. So on the foundation of non-duality, Abhed, if you will, we have the Bhed, the differentiation. One sustains the other. If we only have differentiation, diversity, that will be a problem. That will be conflict. We have that in this world. We have differences of opinion. We may be crashing with one another day after day. But if before getting to the difference, we agree that we agree on one foundational principle, then the difference can be an ornament. That's the idea. Basically, differences are to create ornamentation. And eternity, there are differences. There are differences of opinion even. As we'll say sometimes, during the night, Yashoda will like that Krishna experiences sound sleep, because for her, he's always tired. He always needs to sleep more. He's always hungry. He always needs to eat more. That's Vatsalya Bhav. So for her desire is, I would like Krishna to have sound sleep the whole night. But for the Madhurya Rasamaya Gopis, they're having another project in mind. They pray that Krishna may not have sound sleep at night, but he may have sound meeting with them, sound union with them. So there's a difference of opinion in the Leela for eternity. But it's okay. It's not a conflict. It's not that Golok Vrindavan is collapsing because of that. Actually, both the Gopis and Yashoda love each other more and more and more and more. So there's place for that difference of opinion even in eternity, because the foundation is completely non-dual, so to say. Devotees in Vaikuntha will think Narayan is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna is an avatar of Narayan. And Gaudiya Golok Vrindavan will think the other way around. And it's not who is right, who is wrong. Because some of them live eternal in Vaikuntha. I mean, if you go to Vaikuntha now, to the spiritual world, in Vaikuntha, and you interview one of the Vaikuntha Vasis, they will tell you Krishna is an expansion of Narayan. And there's a place for that, because if there will be absolutely wrong, how that will take place in the spiritual world, basically. So that's an interesting point of view. And of course, you go to Golok, you have a different version. I mean, you don't have a different version in Golok. That's an interesting point. You go to Golok, who is God? Narayan. You go to Vaikuntha, who is God? Narayan. So there must be some truth to that. Can I continue unfolding one point, and at the end we have Q&A and we can share? Yeah. So this perception of non-dual reality is all integrated. It's not a separate thing, basically. The ultimate reality is all for itself, by itself. The ultimate allows us to see everything perfectly in connection to Krishna, basically. That's the vision of the highest devotee. The Bhagavatam, when it says Sarva Bhutesu Yat Pashyati, the vision of the Uttam Bhagavat is Krishna is in everything, everything is in Krishna. That's the vision of the Uttam Bhagavat according to the Bhagavatam. Jai. Shri Ravindraji ki jai. Like Krishna says in the Gita in the 6th chapter, Jumam Pasyati Sarvatra, Sarvam Chamaya Pasyati, and so on. For one who sees me everything and sees everything in me, I'm never lost to him, he's never lost to me. No? That's non-duality in practice, so to say. You are seeing Krishna in everything and everything in Krishna. That's another way of talking about how non-dual vision becomes actualized in one's eye. Krishna is everything, Krishna is in everything. That's Achintya Vedavid. He has his own individual existence. Transcendent, he has his own individual mode. He's transcendent, but he's immanent at the same time. He's everywhere. But when he was with Hiranyakashipu, and Prahlad Sistadev is Krishna. And Prahlad Sistadev is not even Nrsimhadev, is Krishna. And Prahlad is with Hiranyakashipu, and Hiranyakashipu is, where is your God? And Prahlad will be like, where is he not? I'm seeing here everywhere. Even in that pillar, said Prahlad. I'm seeing Krishna in the pillar. And it's not that Prahlad was in Maya body or something, like everything is God. He was, due to the force strength of his love, he was perceiving the presence of his Ishtadev everywhere. So that's the vision of the highest devotee. We may not be on that, but at the same time, we need to relate to the vision of the highest devotees. Because sometimes I've been talking about the things, okay, Krishna is present everywhere. Someone say, well, but that's the vision of Uttam Bhagavat. We are not Uttam Bhagavatas. We cannot imitate. I totally agree. We are not promoting Sahajism here. Let's play Uttam Bhagavat. But at the same time, the vision of Uttam Bhagavat becomes like the yearning and the longing of the sadhaka, so to say. What they see becomes, we start to appreciate what they see in theory at least. And that starts to nourish our journey more and more, more and more. So we go to Vaishnavas again, entertain this idea. The absolute is non-dual. The absolute is one. In Tattva, the absolute is non-dual. In Rasa, there will be differences, of course. That's what Venkata Bhatta said to Mahaprabhu in South India. When Mahaprabhu was, like, how do you say, chiding? No, that's not the expression in English, yeah? Chiding him? No? Like why Lakshmi left the Rasa, left Narayan to want to join Krishna in Rasa Lila. And like implying, my Krishna is higher than your Narayan, no? But in a very friendly mood, basically. No? And basically, Venkata Bhatta said, Narayan and Krishna are one in Tattva. But in Rasa, they are different. So Rasa Vichar is one thing, Tattva Vichar is another thing. There are two levels of discernment, so to say. But at the end of the day, reality is one. Again, the ultimate reality is one. And I'm making this point because if we don't have this idea of non-duality in place, we may start to perceive the absolute in dual terms. And that's a problem. we may start to invoke duality in how we relate to the different phases of the non-dual absolute. For a classic example, someone may think, okay, Paramatma is in every heart, Paramatma is in every atom, but Krishna is somewhere else over there above the clouds doing his lila. And internally we create a dichotomy. Krishna over there, Paramatma over here, like if there were two different people, so to say. Well, remember, Paramatma, Krishna, Bhagavan, Brahman, all of them are one same non-dual reality. So we have to be careful to over-localize God, so to say, in one way or another. No, his presence is here, is not there, or is in my altar, is in my temple, not in the other altar, not in the other temple. He's not in some place. Well, actually, he's always available in every moment at every place, technically speaking. If he's non-dual, he has to be available, like Prahlad saw. It's not that Prahlad only saw Krishna in the altar. The Bhagavatam says that's the vision of the Kanishta Bhagavat. God is in the altar. But when you turn off the altar, you stop seeing him, basically. While the ideal experience of having darshan of Sri Murtis, I'm seeing Bhagavan in the altar, and if the experience is real, I will be able to carry that experience and extend it outside of the altar, or better put, to realize the altar is everywhere, gradually. The altar becomes universalized, and you see your Istadev. Like Prahlad. Prahlad didn't see Krishna only in the altar. He saw Krishna on a pillar. What you won't tell Prahlad, but Prahlad, that's not the altar. No, Krishna's not in the pillar. Krishna's only in the altar. Prahlad is like, he's everywhere. In the altar, everything has become an altar. So our tradition is that. I mean, we worship Krishna, but he expresses itself in so many different ways. But all of them are the same person. Sometimes that's called polymorphic monotheism. Monotheism means one God. Polymorphic means many forms. So one same non-dual absolute expressing himself in many forms. This is what Akrura said in the Bhagavatam when he was praying to Krishna. He referred to him as Bahumurti Eka Murtikam. Bahumurti means many forms. Eka Murtika means one form. So you are one Supreme Lord expressing yourself in a multitude of forms. Be it a bit. Again, one different. We have to get accustomed to coexist with this one and different dynamics. It's not only one, it's not only different. So the ultimate reality expresses itself again in many forms, although it's one. Sometimes we will speak about the three Vishnus, or Krishna in Mathura, in Dwarka, in Braj, Panchatattva, 5 forms of the Absolute, Dasavatar, there you have 10. So if we don't have a proper non-dual conception, we have such a big pantheon of expressions of the divinity that if you do not keep the non-duality in place, you may start to become polytheistic. And there's a lot of polytheists in India also. Many gods. Of course, we are not proposing that. We are not saying God is 2, is 3, is 4. God is one. The absolute reality is one, non-dual. But there's such a multitude of expressions of the divine that if we don't have this non-dual foundation in place, we may start to feel there are different personalities. To put it bluntly, if I say Narayan, Krishna, Narasimha, Mahaprabhu, they are not different people, so to say. You follow? They are the same person, expressing them from different places. It's a basic point, I think, but sometimes the point is how much do we internally feel that when we relate to Nrsimhadev, when we pray to Mahaprabhu, when we go in the altar to the different forms of the same absolute, how much we keep in mind it's one person, it's not many gods that I'm worshiping. So in this connection, it's important to conceive the idea Gaudiya Vedanta is a non-dual tradition, because we have so many faces of the absolute that we can get a little bit distracted in polytheistic terms if we don't keep the unity in mind. And of course, if we lose sight of the non-duality, the problem is that duality comes into the picture. And when duality comes into the picture, it's a problem, like the Bhagavatam itself said, Bhayam Dvitiya Abhiniveshatasya. So the Dvitiya comes into the, no Advitiya, no Advaigyan, but Dvitiya, which means duality or dualism. And the Bhagavatam mentions, if we become dualistic, we become full of fear. Bhagavatam says that Bhayam or fear comes due to absorption, abhinivesh, absorption in dual thinking. And of course, eventually that creates, makes us turn away from God and forget our constitutional relationship with Him. This whole verse presents that problem that starts with being dualistic. So the solution to being dualistic is understanding reality is non-dual. We Gaudiyas are non-dual. But we can be non-dual in principle, but sometimes we can express ourselves in pretty dualistic terms. So that's an important point also. As we were talking the other day, we are officially personalists. Our tradition is personalistic, but sometimes we may behave in pretty impersonal ways, pretty depersonalized ways, treat each other not as a person, treat ourselves not as a person. Sometimes treat Krishna not as the person that he is. Remember, he's the supreme personality of God. He's not just a person, but if there is someone who is a person, that's Krishna to begin with. If there's someone who is personalized, individuated, that's Krishna to begin with. But how much we address such a supreme personality as a supreme personality. So my point is, there can be impersonalism lurking in the midst of our personalism. So in the same way, we may be officially a non-dual tradition, but sometimes we may misrepresent a non-dual tradition in very dualistic terms. Not only in how we conceive God as different thing, but being dualistic. There are so many ways we can be dualistic through different behaviors like fundamentalism, fanaticism, cognitive rigidity, narrow-mindedness. There are forms of dualism that do not actually represent what Gaudiya Vaishnavism is about. Let me share if a brief paragraph from my book in this connection, with your permission. It says like this. It says, dualistic thinking means fragmented consciousness instead of unity. Maybe this is a good way to understand why any community may be fragmented at any point of its unfolding. That happens. In our particular situation as Gaudiyas, the current fragmentation in our community may be at least partly caused by how fragmented many of us still are in our own dualistic approach to God Himself, and by extension to everything else, which is energies. We can have an hyper-personalized tradition and theological conception, but a totally depersonalized or even impersonal way of conceiving and relating to those very ideas and to one another. So again, and this happens everywhere. I'm not here just pointing at the Gaudiya tradition. It's like, it happens in every community, in every tradition, in every group. In time, fragmentation may come, dualism may come, but it's not the fault of the Sampradaya in this case, not the fault of Mahaprabhu. It's just the dualism that we still keep in our own minds and hearts, and that we need to encourage, transcend in order to be properly encouraged in non-dual terms. So reality is non-dual, but we will only, we will only understand that reality is non-dual if we behave ourselves through non-dual thinking. For example, the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that the Bhagavatam was spoken in Samadhi Bhasha. You may have heard that expression. Vyasadeva spoke the Bhagavad in Samadhi Bhasha. Bhasha means language, and Samadhi means Samadhi, the language of divine trance, so to say. So if a book is spoken in the language of trance, probably you will fully understand it by yourself entering in trance. If a book is spoken in Samadhi, you will access that book in Samadhi fully. You may access partially according to your situation, but you will fully access that reality by entering the same Samadhi that the author had when composing it. So in the same way as the Bhagavatam is written in Samadhi and can be understood in Samadhi, reality is non-dual in nature, but we will only understand that if we approach reality from a non-dual perspective. If we remain dualistic, we won't be able to understand how reality is non-dual in nature. Or we may even approach Bhagavan in dualistic terms. So I don't want to extend myself too much. I also want to leave a few minutes if there were any questions or comments, since I know that Arti will be in a few minutes, but I just want to share some words on the topic in connection to non-dual Gaudiya Vedanta, so we can remind each other of how our tradition is actually a non-dual tradition in its own way, not Advaita Vedanta, but Gaudiya Vedanta, Achintya Veda Vedanta, so to say. The foundation is non-duality. On the basis of that unity, it will find its place. And that's what we refer to with the term also Sambandha. Sambandha means linked, tied together, and Sam means everything. And the Gyan is knowledge of how everything is interrelated and interconnected with the same non-dual foundation in the center. That's that's a wonderful idea just to meditate in for a minute. That everything is absolutely interconnected with everything else. Everyone is we are all connected with everything else. And there's a common center that we are to honor. So yeah, some thoughts. Jai Jagan has some question or some comment.
I'm not able to draw the bridge out of why a non-dual thinking is required to be a radical personalist. I guess I just need just a little clarity how you define radical personalist, and how does non-dual thinking help that? Or someone may think I can be dualistic thinking and also be a radical personalist. So I'm just not trying to bridge that between those two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why is non-dual thinking required to be a radical personalist? That's the question.
Mm-hmm. Well, in brief, because you cannot have radical personalism without a non-dual foundation. Because again, radical personalism is another way of talking about Gaudiya Vaishnavism. I repeat it again. And you can have Gaudiya Vaishnavism without a non-dual foundation. Because again, Gaudiya Vaishnavism is a particular approach to reality, and reality is ultimately non-dual. So non-duality is the foundation, and unless we acknowledge that non-dual foundation, we can have whatever comes on top of that foundation, so to say. So to be a radical personalist, so to say, implies, among other things, to acknowledge the non-dual nature of reality, to behave accordingly. Again, to be extremely personalist or radically personalist is to relate to everything and everyone, considering the underlying unity and connection that everything has with this same non-dual reality. So for me, at least, that's one of the points. Like, to be a personalist, to treat each other in a personal way, we have to realize all of us are connected to each other by constitution. So that has to do with me, this non-dual thinking. Non-dual also has to do, we all share the same non-dual foundation. So that makes us interconnected immediately. So that allows me to be completely personal to each one of you, because we share a tie, so to say, a common bond. Everything shares a common bond with the absolute non-dual reality in the center.
I was going to say in relation to that, I see how devotees, we sometimes get so caught up in one particular thing or the other about in regard to understanding of the Shastra, or understanding of Christian consciousness, or understanding of the philosophy, and then we kind of get set in our ways and kind of project that to others, or like kind of like see that reality as that person should be kind of that way as well, and then when they're not, it kind of becomes like an awkward kind of, because you're saying you have this whole like understanding of like, you mentioned like personal and being impersonal. A lot of times, because our philosophy is personal, but a lot of times we can be very impersonal with each other. And then another point I was going to make is like, what if someone's reality is they're not even a Vaishya, they're not even a devotee, but we're like maybe some prominent person in the Catholic Church that's doing very good preaching, and we're making people come to God, to Jesus Christ, and we feel like we're doing a great service, and we're bringing people closer to God, and even some people do miracles and this and that, but they're still, eating meat and doing all these other things, intoxication. And so is that person's reality, like, are they really getting close to God? Like, do they feel like they are, or is there just, some false identification?
Well,
I mean, kind of two different points.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Regarding your first point, I agree with your point that sometimes we, and again, even if we are not doing that, we have the potential to fall into that. So we should be humbled by that. This idea of, we kind of idealize how everything should be done, should be said, should be presented, and if someone doesn't fit into that box, that's wrong, that's non-bona fide, and we know that that's not how reality operates. I mean, there are so many ways of doing so many ways of being a devotee. It's not that, okay, this is how you can be of course, in the beginning, as we said the other day, someone may come to the temple day one and may ask, what does it mean to be a devotee? And you will receive the more like day one reply to that, so to say. Do this, and you are a devotee. Okay, it's pretty simplistic. And everyone will receive the same answer, but in time, one's own personality and individuality will have to embrace bhakti, and you have to become an individual in bhakti, and you will have to realize Krishna is an individual also. He wants to have an hyper-personalized relationship with me, which is completely different than the relationship he's having with every devotee, every other devotee, and he will inspire every devotee in different ways, and we have to accommodate that. Yeah. As long as that's genuine inspiration. Of course, I'm not saying here just let's justify anything, but we know there is place for diversity, there's place for variety, and if that variety is popping up on the basis of something genuine, on the basis of some real connection, we have to celebrate that variety. That's to be glorified. That's the need that all of us have. Here we are not pointing to someone in particular, just something that it's natural. So, but I appreciate your point on how sometimes we can commit that mistake, that feeling, they are doing the kirtan different than I do. They are doing the Mangalacharan different. They cook prasad differently. They give the class with different words that I am accustomed. And it's okay. We may have our own taste, and we may have our own preference, our main inspirations, and that's like, we have to honor that, but we have also to honor how Krishna may choose to touch the heart of other people, and not only in the Gaudiya tradition, and then I go to your second point, but also we can see people in other traditions which are in a very genuine way practicing, not even only Christianity, but it's other Vaishnava Sampradayas. Like I was giving the example of the devotees in Vaikuntha, and they will be in eternity in the spiritual world having a difference of opinion with us, in one sense. Because also I mentioned, in one sense there is no difference of opinion, and we have to honor that. If I found a Sri Vaishnava and he tells me Krishna is an avatar, I won't fight with him. I won't try to convince him to prove him wrong, because also Shastra is presented in some way that it lends itself to be read in that place, and there's place for that. Sri Vaishnava will read the Bhagavatam in a different way that we read the Bhagavatam, and a follower of Advaita Vedanta will find verses in the Bhagavatam to support their doctrine. Shastra is Kalpataru, it's a well-wishing tree. No? So according to your wish, somehow the message will also speak to that. There is place for that. So yeah, we should be humble and not. At the end of the day, it all goes back to Trinada Pisa Nichina Tadaura Pisa Krishna Namani Namanadena Kirtaniyas. I was the other day meeting with Radhanan Maharaj, and he was sharing. We talked for 4 hours, and probably of those 4 hours, 2.5 were about Trinada Pisa Nichina. I was happy about that. Yeah.
Just one last thing.
Yeah.
Just talking about you.
I was just about to say something about Trinada Pisa Nichina. Don't cut me at that point, please. A few words on this verse that is very beautiful. Just a few words. That again, if we skip this verse, we are totally sabotaging our spiritual journey. This third verse of Shikshashtanga, at least for me, it's like put everything else in context. And always caught me red-handed, so to say. Because you may think so many things, I'm getting to know this, I'm becoming advanced, I'm transcending that, and learn so many shlokas, I'm this or that. But go over and over again to this third verse and see where you are actually standing. That's like the most sobering dose of advice that our whole sampradaya revolves around. That's so important. So over and over again, and we should never underestimate all that verse is speaking about. That's why Mahaprabhu and Raghunath Das Goswami requested him, instruct me about the goal of life. Of course, he ended up saying, Braja Radha Krishna Manasa Karibe. Your mind serves Shri Radha and Krishna and Braj. That's a conclusion. But to reach there, he basically mentioned this verse. And even before mentioning this verse, he said, Gramya Katana Sunive Gramya Vartana Kahive. Don't gossip. That's interesting. It sounds very basic, but that's Mahaprabhu's instructing Raghunath Das Goswami, actually us, through Raghunath Das Goswami. Raghunath Das Goswami was not precisely a gossiper at all. But the first thing he told him is, do not gossip, do not speak gossip, do not hear gossip. And that will take you to the third verse, and that will take you to Maseo and Braj, so to say, to put it in very encapsulated reply in those three sections. So I'm saying this because sometimes gossip is not just, oh, he did this, he did that, but also entertaining our own minds, this type of things that you spoke about, oh, I don't like how they did that. That's not how I like. That's not according to my mood. That's different. And maybe start to even from your mind, share it through your tongue and express your disagreement with how someone did something different than how you will do it. But what? If I will do something different, it doesn't mean that it's better or it's worse, it's just different. So, in connection to your second point, again, there's people in other traditions that we can learn from as well. Our own acharyas also. Rupa Goswami, his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he's referring to Balabacharya's Pushti Marg. He's talking about Pushti, he's talking about Maryat. He's referring to other religions, technically speaking. So it's not that we are here only to speak about Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Jiva Goswami in the Sandaras, he's referring to Madhvacharya, he's referring to Ramanujacharya, he's even referring to Sankaracharya, and not only to refute him. Sometimes he's referring to Sankaracharya to prove his point further. And all of these are very different paths, especially Sankaracharya, but they are drawing something from that. So we have to remain open to learning from other traditions. And I wouldn't say like that people in other tradition is far from God, close to, I mean, that would be a very like generic abstraction to speak for the whole of Christianity, so to say, because every single person is unique. No? It's like saying all Gaudiya Vaishnavas are going to the same place or doing it the same way. Not everyone is an individual. If I will just conclude about the whole group, that will be another form of impersonalism instead of addressing the unique situation of each case. But at least personally, I've had very interesting exchanges and experiences with mystical Christianity and mystic Christians and practitioners who you can really feel. Of course, they are not pointing to Golok, and it's okay, but they have a very deep connection with the divine, very deep realizations, and there's no problem in being nourished by them. On the contrary.
I was just gonna say, like our acharyas, whenever we see, like if we talk about like Guru Day, for example, or we talk about some disciple or Srila Prabhupada when they're being interviewed, the thing that they say most prominently is that, he came to us with love and devotion. He won us over by his affection, by his love, by all his different sweet. So I think a lot of times we miss that as devotees, like what really the acharya is winning us over.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so how, in other words, how are we winning others over in that way, or in which way are we doing that? Like, are we doing that with love and affection, or just with like, some intention to like point, or like what our ideas are, like how we perceive it to be?
Yeah. Let me share a few words from Thakur Bhaktivinoda from his. This is from I don't have here there. Let me see, just to give the reference. This is Thakur Bhaktivinoda from Sri Chaitanya Sikshamrita, first shower. And this connection, very beautiful words. He says, if one goes to someone else's place of worship, one should think, oh, these people are worshiping my Lord, but in a different way. Because of my different training, I cannot quite comprehend this system of worship. However, through this experience, I can deepen my appreciation for my own system of worship. The Lord is only one, not two. I offer respect to the form I see here and pray to the Lord in this new form that He increases my love for love in His accustomed form. Those who do not follow this procedure but instead criticize other systems of worship and show hatred, violence, and envy are worthless and foolish. The more they indulge in useless quarreling, the more they betray the very goal of their religion. Thakur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. It's Thakur Bhaktivinoda, it's not Swami Padmanabh. So we belong to the Bhaktivinoda Parivar. We belong to the family of Bhaktivinoda. So this type of thing should be very deeply foundational. Evan, you have some comment or question?
Yes. I can't remember where I read this, but it was described in two classes of Vaishnavas. One is fixated, like pretty much only on
A little louder, sorry, I have the ACs nearby.
I can't remember where I read this, but I remember seeing two Sanskrit words used to describe like different classes of Vaishnavas. One of them is fixated basically exclusively on their Ishtadev, and they only hear topics and chant mantras where they consecrate their practice around only that Ishtadev. And then other sadhakas or devotees might hear, they have their Ishtadev, but they are hearing about also all the forms of their love, and that nurtures their attachment and devotion. So I don't really have a fully formed question about that, but it seems like sometimes we hear the acharyas speaking about, like Prabhupada says in the 65th chapter of Gita report, he said like one should exclusively fix their mind on Brahmananda and Krishna, not deviating their mind to any other form of Bhagavan and Ram and Vishnu. But then you're kind of giving a voice to this other side, and also the Acharyas themselves are also giving. So maybe just help me understand like, the kind of relationship between these two devotees.
Yeah. Again, we should learn to include both considerations because naturally, of course, in our tradition, there is the idea of an Ishtadev, and we worship Bhagavan in a certain particular form, and we aspire to serve him eternally in that particular form. It's not that, okay, I want to eternally go to Vaikuntha, Ayodhya, Nityanavadi, Golok, Vrindavan, Dwarka, and Mathura, and have a 5 expanded form to serve them all. Generally, that's not the case. So in that sense, there is some emphasis, try to focus on the Istadev of the Sampradaya you belong to, that will be like a natural thing. But also that has to be done, again, with maturity and with breadth and depth, in the sense not to dismiss all the other forms as inferior, so to say, or as wrong or as bad or in a sectarian way, and to be able, as we talk today, to understand all these other forms are my Istadev also. No, in one sense, my Istadev is Braja Krishna, but Braja Krishna is including all the other forms of the Absolute. So I'm not to dismiss all these forms, but to show appreciation, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur was saying, while I'm having my particular attraction. I mean, if we are properly situated, even when that was for me the best part of the quote, that when Thakur Bhaktivinoda said, okay, I'm witnessing how others worship their Lord, and that nourishes my faith in my Lord, because their Lord and my Lord are the same Lord. No? That's very nicely depicted in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, when Gopakumar is doing his journey, and he at one point reaches Ayodhya and meets Hanuman. And of course, Gopakumar's Istadev is not Ram, but it's Madan Gopal, Krishna in Vrindavan in Sakyarasa. And Hanuman's Istadevata is, of course, Dasarathy Ram. But they meet each other, and it's not that okay, let's try to convince each other about who is better and I will defeat you in debate and so on. But Gopakumar says to Hanuman, please chant the glories of your Lord. And Hanuman starts to glorify Sri Ram. And Gopakumar is hearing the praise of Sri Ram, and in his heart he says, Jai Madan Gopal. Because he understands we are talking about the same person, but how one glorifies my Lord creates, and then the opposite. Hanuman tells Gopakumar, please chant the glories of your Prabhu. So Gopakumar starts to glorify Madan Gopal, and Hanuman says, Jai Sri Ram. Because they understand we are talking about the same person, but from the perspective of our heart. So that's kind of the perfection of interreligious dialogue, so to say. Well, we know we are talking about the same beloved, but appreciating the different nuances, but that's nourishing my own inspiration in my own tradition. It's not that if I meet with a mystic Christian, I start to get confused and lose my faith in Gaudiya Vaishnava. That shouldn't happen. Of course, if I don't have the capacity of dealing with that diversity, I may be a little bit more. There's place for more sectarianism in the beginning. Srila Prabhupada will give the example of like a fence. Like the beginning of the journey, you have this little, it's like bud, that the budding stage of bhakti, you're very fragile, very easily disturbed, so to say. So you put a fence around the bud. So the bud is not seeing anything outside the fence. Reality is what happens inside the box, inside the fence. But due to that fence is protecting you and giving you strength to grow, and naturally, at one point, you will grow above the fence. But when you reach that point, you will be rooted enough not to be extremely disturbed by what the winds or whatever influences make out outside of the fence. So again, there, depending on each case or the journey of each devotee, there may be place for being more sectarian in the beginning, so to say, eventually learning to accommodate diversity. And And eventually, many devotees at the end of their journey may also become more and more focused and exclusively in the East today. But again, there's no universal rule that it begins like this, follows like this, concludes like this for everyone exactly the same. For each one of us, there is a very unique journey. So each one of us have to find our place in that as well. Okay. Yes.
Understand it. Like philosophically, it makes so much sense when you hear it, but then when you try to apply it in your life, emotions get involved, usually. Like I will take philosophy, and depending on how I'm feeling, I will use it to make me feel better. Because there is always, and I do that sometimes. And so I'm trying to understand how to go beyond because in the conditional living, it's gonna be like rationality and emotions working together to practice spiritual life. And then it manifests in different ways, and that's why conflicts between yourself and with others come from. It's kind of natural. But how to get beyond that? What are the steps? I don't know. I'm not really clear. That's why I'm trying to
I know, it's clear.
Yeah,
Sí.
dilo en español. No, pero si puedes decirlo mejor en español, dilo para que tú misma.
Igual creo que entiendo la idea, creo que se entiende, pero si hay algo que te sientes expresarlo mejor en español, yo lo traduzco al inglés como sea, no hay problema.
Creo que eso es.
Okay. So yeah, of course, all these how questions, like how to do that, how to are not easy. It's not easy to reply to them like, okay, this is the magical formula, and in 5 minutes you're like, this is a magical formula. Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ji ki jai. Arting starting? Yeah? Yeah. So we'll start arting now. So we continue talking during lunch and we can continue sharing. Thank you so much. Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ji ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Pramananda.